I was delivering pizzas to an abandoned church on the outskirts of town. It was my first week on the job, and I was already getting lost a few times. But I finally found a place, and it seemed empty. There were no cars parked around, and the only sound I could hear was the rustling of a cornfield behind the church. The church loomed ominously in the distance, its dark silhouette casting an eerie shadow against the backdrop of a sprawling cornfield. The structure was old and weathered, its paint chipped and peeling in places, giving it a haunted appearance. As I approached the church, I noticed the overgrown grass and weeds that surrounded it, giving it an abandoned and neglected feel. There were no cars parked around the building, and no signs of life could be seen from the outside. I figured that I would be in and out pretty fast, so I just left my car running. The radio was playing kind of loud, but I didn't think it was too blasphemous. I mean, rock and punk music never hurt nobody. Am I right? The church's tall spire jutted into the sky, seemingly reaching up to the heavens, but instead of inspiring feelings of awe or wonder, it only served to intensify the building's menacing aura. As I moved closer, I could make out the intricate details of the building's architecture, including the imposing stone columns that lined the front entrance, each one carved with elaborate designs that looked almost like strange symbols. The entrance itself was made of heavy, dark wood, with iron hinges that creaked ominously as I pushed it open. The interior of the church was just as foreboding as the outside, with tall, arched windows that let in very little light, and pews that looked as though they hadn't been used in years. The walls were adorned with religious icons and paintings, but they looked faded and weathered, as though they had been hanging there for centuries. As I moved deeper into the church, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up in response. Outside, the cornfield rustled ominously in the wind, and I couldn't help but feel like I was being swallowed up by the darkness that surrounded me. It was a feeling that I wouldn't soon forget, and one that made me realize that some places are best left unexplored. As I started unloading the food, I saw a sign that directed me to the back. As I turned the corner, I saw a long table with a stack of paper plates and cups. I assumed this was where I was supposed to leave the food. There was no one around, but I could feel a sense of unease in the air. Suddenly, I saw people dressed in black coming from a cornfield. They had vacant faces and were walking cautiously towards me. As I turned to fully understand what was happening, I saw a woman dressed in a competing food delivery company frantically running towards me, pleading for help. But before I could do anything, the people in black closed in on her and dragged her back into the cornfield. I knew then that I was in serious trouble, and I had to do something. I raced towards the cornfield, hoping to catch up to the woman and save her from whatever horrors awaited her. But as I got closer, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The ground beneath me felt unstable, and I could hear whispers coming from the rows of corn. I pushed forward, driven by fear and a desire to save the woman. But as I got deeper into the field, I realized that I was hopelessly lost. The rows of corn seemed to shift and move around me, and I could feel eyes watching me from every direction. I called out for the woman, but there was no response. All I could hear was the sound of my own breathing and the rustling of the corn around me. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything went silent. I was alone in the cornfield, surrounded by an eerie stillness. In the distance, I saw the woman I was trying to help. She had a vacant look and was staring at me like I was her next meal. I felt like I was lured into a trap, inside a cornfield and disoriented. Then I heard what was possibly the thing that saved my life. It was a random tune that carried over the air from my car. I heard the unmistakable beginning riffs of Hotel California. I put my head down, concentrating as best as I could. I ran back to my car, as fast as I could, grateful to be alive but haunted by the memory of what I had witnessed. I heard some footsteps behind me, the corn stalks moving around. But as soon as I cleared the field, I shot past the table and left whatever food was there. In the corner of my eye, I saw what I could only describe as a pastor, dressed in black. His head was grossly misshapen and looked like a goat with short horns sticking from above his ears. He was holding a book, but I didn't slow down to figure out what his deal was. If anything, I was inspired to run faster. As I drove away from the abandoned church, my mind was racing with questions. What kind of cult was operating out of that place? Were they involved in some kind of human trafficking? And what had happened to the woman I had seen being dragged back into the cornfield? I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something truly sinister, and as the days went by, I found myself becoming increasingly paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder and jumping at every little sound. It wasn't until a few weeks later that I finally got some answers. I was delivering pizzas to a nearby house when I saw a poster on the wall with a picture of the woman I had seen in the cornfield. The poster was asking for information on her whereabouts, and I knew that I had to come forward. I went to the police and told them everything I had seen at the abandoned church. They launched an investigation and eventually uncovered a disturbing network of cults operating throughout the area, using the cover of food delivery services to kidnap and brainwash people. What I didn't realize was that there were other churches or cults that started springing up in other places. Because they were so low-key, it was hard to know where they were or how they got started. I had a theory that anyone could buy land in the middle of nowhere and just start a non-profit. Maybe they never even registered as a church and just used old buildings when no one was around. Thanks to my testimony, they were able to rescue some of the people and put an end to that particular cult's operations. I never heard if they found the pastor. I assumed someone would have said there was a goatman in the frock, but that never happened. But even though justice had been served, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me since that fateful day in the cornfield. To this day, I avoid delivering to remote locations, and I always keep my eyes peeled for anything out of the ordinary. The memory of that terrifying encounter will stay with me forever, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks just beneath the surface of our everyday lives.